Wolverine!
Storm!
Nightcrawler! Cyclops!
Beast!
Hey folks, Nick Culbertson here, and today we're looking at 10 iconic Uncanny X-Men covers. Let's get started! The X-Men got their start with Jack Kirby and Stan Lee creating another team comic book. Fantastic Four, where is it? Fantastic Four had already been a popular series for Marvel, and they had gotten many requests for doing another team comic book. After they did Fantastic Four, and continue to do Fantastic Four, they moved on to characters like the Hulk and the Spider-Man, amazingly enough. Interesting note, they're named the X-Men because of Charles Xavier. All this time, I don't know what I thought the X stood for. No men. Extreme men. Extra men. In the 90s, when my brother and I went to the comic book store, we were looking for different things. I was always looking for dudes that were bashing against other dudes. And meanwhile, his comic book series were the Uncanny X-Men. He was getting the back issues. He was reading his comic books, dork. In those days, we shared everything. Our CDs, our video games, except for whenever it came to comic books and action figures. You come back with those Cobra. So needless to say, actually needed to be say, I need to say this, X-Men were not my own. Not the way that Spider-Man and Hulk were mine. That is, of course, until they started taking over all mainstream, kids' mainstream media. There was the X-Men NES game, which was too difficult for me at the time. I got it from Blockbuster, and you only have like 2 days to master a game before you have to return it. But then there was the X-Men cartoon series. Every Saturday morning they had a bunch of cartoons, and it was always ended with a new episode of X-Men. Later they would take over the big screen too. I remember my friends going to see the first X-Men movie and then talking about what all short cameos happened of all these X-Men characters. But the real Tower of Awesome was the X-Men arcade machine. It had everything. It was a beat 'em up. It was a pretty standard beat 'em up, but it was awesome because it had the X-Men in it, and that sucker would chow down on your quarters. Not only that, it was a game that you could play with like 5 friends. How many controllers were there? 8? 6? 28! There were 3 characters that always tickled my fancy. Number 1, Gambit, the cool one. Number 2, Storm, the one who shows that women and representation in comic books really matter while kicking major butt. But it wasn't until the year of the 1970s that they introduced my main dude, your main dude. The reason that X-Men are all together, and no, I don't mean Charles Xavier, I'm talking about Wolverine. The claws, the costume, the hair, all combined to make one heck of a superhero. All right, I'm getting fired up. I know y'all are getting fired up too. All right, come on. Here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna jump into this list. I want y'all to get ready for it. I want you to get pumped about it. I want you to be enthusiastic, and I want you to watch with all your might. Watch very intently. Don't blink. Don't blink, just watch it. Don't blink. Whatever you do, don't blink. Don't blink. Let's kick this list off with number 1. So the first cover we have is for X-Men issue number 1. The first appearance of the X-Men and each of the individual X-Men and as a team. I like how Iceman's here on the bottom having a literal snowball fight with Magneto. And on the side it says, in the sensational Fantastic Four style. So just like we saw on Spider-Man, how they were giving top billing to Fantastic Four to try and sell Spider-Man comics, here they're saying, hey, you like Fantastic Four? Well, you're gonna love this. And X-Men today has become more popular than Fantastic Four, maybe. I have no data to back that up. Let's move on. Number 2. The next comic on our list is X-Men issue 14. This one's Jack Kirby again. This is the first appearance of the Sentinels. And what I like about this is you can see he's done some gradient work, like on the helmet of the Sentinel, and that's not something you see a lot of in early comic books. I think because the coloring was more difficult back then, but I do like the drama of the Sentinel, how it has the shadow underneath it. Of course, they would carry on with the Sentinel throughout the series and having it in many different comics. You can tell by these other comic covers that the Sentinels are much larger than the X-Men themselves. And I just love this last cover where he's blasting Wolverine, and also it says, "This issue, everybody dies," in lettering that looks like it would be from a 1950s horror film.
Number 3.
Next, we have Giant Size X-Men number 1, and this is where the team transitions from being Jean Grey, Iceman, Cyclops, Angel, and Beast into being more similar to the team that I grew up with. And it is all of their first appearances except for Wolverine, who had been in Hulk previously, and Cyclops, who has been the unofficial leader of the X-Men up to this point.
Number 4.
Next, we jump to issue 101, and you can see on the cover Jean Grey getting taken over by the Phoenix Force. There are several covers in the series that have Jean Grey in a similar pose to this. I like this one because the strokes are really strong black lines that add some drama to it and make it look more like an early comic book. Issue 125 also has a return of Phoenix. I really like how they did the silhouette here, and there's a lot of action happening in each of the corners. Issue 135 has Dark Phoenix, and she's taken a page from Hulk's book and crushing the actual words X-Men. And finally, issue 157, where she's just standing there in a cool pose, looking like a boss from the top of the comic all the way down to the bottom, with pink smoke feathering all around.
Number 5.
Next, we have the Uncanny X-Men 141, and this was the last issue of X-Men just being called X-Men, and from this point on, it was called the Uncanny X-Men. Interestingly enough, this one is actually called X-Men, even though it says the Uncanny X-Men, but then the next issue is the start of the Uncanny X-Men. I always like this cover, one, because it has Wolverine in some plain street clothes, and also the dramatic lighting that's happening with the yellow spotlight lighting them. And if you look at everything just outside of the spotlight, the hue shifts to blue and it gets really grainy and gritty. This is a rare, dark, pulpy aesthetic that you don't see in too many X-Men covers, and that's why it's on this list. Huzzah!
Number 6.
Next, we jump to issue 212. And we have a cover with Wolverine on there. This is Wolverine's first time of fighting Sabretooth. It's awesome. It's awesome because, with some of the early X-Men comics, they sort of always tried to fit the entire team on here. But now you have just one character being featured, Wolverine. You have a full body shot. He is right in the middle of the action. The body is twisted. You have foreshortening with the claws and this hand closer, with his other arm being in the background. It's just awesome. This cover is doing everything that a comic book cover should do. It's saying,
"Hey kid, tell your parents to buy me."
Of course, Wolverine was on many covers that could have made it on this list, and because I didn't want the list to all just be Wolverine covers, now we will look at a series of different covers that Wolverine was featured in, sometimes fighting against an enemy, and other times just by himself, facing off against you, the reader. I really like this cover that has the pink and purple on it with some yellow highlights under the word X-Men. Another one where Wolverine is cutting into your comic book, depleting the value of it before you've even purchased it. And of course, this last cover from issue 258, where Wolverine is fighting against another guy. It throws us right into the middle of the action. This one's done by Jim Lee, and the way he did the lighting and the pose of the body is just awesome. This one would have been in its own spot in the list, but we got some more Jim Lee coming up.
Number 7.
Next is issue 238. This cover is Silvestri, who is one of the artists that went on to become one of the co-founders of Image Comics. I like how he's taken a more cartoony approach to what the X-Men look like. He's doing some awesome foreshortening of having Wolverine's fist and claw all the way in the front and then his little teeny tiny foot there in the back. Colossus is looking super jacked, about to jump into the action. And here in the foreground, you have the guns that are blue and green shades, desaturated, and purple hands into a gray shadow. There was some real clever use of coloring, and the composition is great. And I don't think this is a key issue, so you could probably pick up one like this for ultra cheap, and it's definitely one of those underappreciated classics just based on the merit of the cover.
Number 8.
Next, a comic book that is not underappreciated is X-Men issue 266. This is the first appearance of Gambit. He's on here with the cover with Storm. Probably because of the X-Men cartoon series, Gambit was always one of my favorite. He's sort of a mix between Casey Jones and a 1980s rocker. And he has a darkness to him that makes him a superhero that is not like the classic ones, where everything is just positive and upbeat all the time.
Number 9.
Next, we jump to Uncanny X-Men issue 268. This is another cover by Jim Lee. Having the characters look off in the distance of this one gives it a real iconic, important feel. While they're not in the middle of the action, they do seem very stoic and prepared for whatever is coming next. There's some real dramatic lighting that's happening from the right side of the page, and then you have some real cool rim light coming from the left side. It's another one of those ones that I would call a poster piece. Next, we're going to jump to some honorable mentions. X-Men number 4, another Jack Kirby cover. I love the way that he's done Magneto's eyes in this cover. And again, the gradient of the reddish-orange going down to the lighter orange-yellow color would have been something that was really difficult to pull off in those days. We also have X-Men issue 140 with Wendigo. I really like the smear that's happening of his arm coming across the screen. Wolverine smashing into the tree. And just the pose of Wendigo is what I'm all about. There's also Uncanny X-Men 165. I like this one. It shows Storm turning into this gnarly looking bug. And issue 234, where Wolverine here is turning into another gnarly looking bug creature. Some really dramatic light happening there with the purple shooting down in a gradient and him having the blue and green tones all over his skin. And here is issue 168 with Kitty Pryde, again in one of those dramatic spotlight moments. And lastly, we have issue 264 of X-Men with Jim Lee right here. The way he draws Beast is absolutely awesome, and the supporting characters in the background are cool too. The action is shooting all around the reader. This is a more rough and ready look than the Jim Lee that we would come to know in the later X-Men series, but regardless, it's still a cool looking cover.
Number 10.
Next, we jump to issue 281, and this is the new team of the X-Men, now having new costumes, new members. And from the look of this, I would have thought it was Jim Lee, but it's actually William Portacio, which it turns out is another person that was one of the co-founders of Image. So in Uncanny X-Men, you had at least 3 people that left later to become founders for Image. Portacio, Silvestri, and Jim Lee. This cover from 281 does look a lot like what Jim Lee started to look like when he spun off and created his own X-Men series, no longer the X-Men series. That's kind of confusing that it started out as the X-Men, then it transitioned to the Uncanny X-Men, then it stayed the Uncanny X-Men, but they started a new series called X-Men. Jim Lee's X-Men was an incredible series. All the art in it was great, just the same way that the Spider-Man ones were once Todd McFarlane took those over. So again, if you want me to do a video of top 10 iconic X-Men covers, sans Uncanny, let me know in the comments down below. I'd be happy to do it. I actually have some of those comics back in the bin, and they want to come out. They want to see you, see what you've been up to.
Wasn't that a special moment we just shared?
So growing up, the X-Men didn't belong to me,
But now they do belong to me, and they belong to you as well. So take that, Ben. I'm coming for your comic books.
thank you so much for watching this video.
Let me know in the comments down below
Which one was your favorite, and which one did I leave off the list? So that's it for this video. I have been Nick Culbertson. You have been you. You keep doing you and being you and striving to be a better you. And I'll be a better me too. Hey, one last thing. If you're liking the videos, come talk to me in the comments. Let me know. Like it, subscribe, do all those things. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you X people next time.